Hello and welcome to another edition of VU Sports Wired. I'm your host, Max Schneider, alongside Justin Hershey and Bobby Kent. We have a great show for you today. Vanderbilt Basketball with a tough loss last night in the second half against Kentucky, 78-64. We'll lead with that, and then we will break down the Vandy boys' start of the season. They kick off baseball season on Friday in Arizona against the runner-up Michigan Wolverines. That'll begin their title defense with a 3-game set. Michigan, then UConn, then Cal Poly. But we'll start with the game last night. Vanderbilt taking on Kentucky. For most of this first half, guys, this looked like, just like it did against LSU, this looked like a team poised to pull off another home upset against a ranked opponent. And we saw them play this way against Kentucky just 2 weeks ago, taking a 7-point lead into halftime then, 9-point lead into halftime now, and what happened that time happened this time. Kentucky steamrolled them right out of the locker room, kind of ran them out of this game later in that second half. I mean, do you think there's kind of a theme to these kind of second half slow starts? Stackhouse called it getting punched in the mouth in the second half. What's kind of the common denominator there, or is there even one?
I think there definitely is. I think, look, anytime you're dealing with a young team, I think that a team will have propensity to not keep their foot in the gas.
They're going to get complacent.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think you saw in that first half a lot of shots go down. I think you saw Vanderbilt really just outworking and out-hustling Kentucky. You see here in transition, they just really got out and ran, which I thought was really great. And I thought they got away from it in the second half. I thought they got really stagnant. I thought they were using way too many straight-line drives and not working the ball around, making the extra pass as much. And we'll get into it more, but I think some of the personnel choices from Stackhouse in the second half, keeping Obina in there over Moyer, who I thought gave you some good minutes in that first half, was definitely something I didn't personally agree with. But obviously, Coach Stack saw Obina in there over Moyer.
Yeah, I thought it was, another tale of two halves like we've seen this entire season. I thought I'm going to give credit to Jerry Stackhouse for drawing up good plays in the first half. I thought guys got open to make shots. I thought, and then also the threes were falling at a really good clip. They were 8 for 17 at the end of the first half.
Yep.
That's about as well as you can ever expect a team to shoot from three, especially against good competition like Kentucky. And I thought it was a really balanced effort overall from Evans and Disu and Pippen. But then the second half, I'd say they got tight. Kentucky in the first half missed a lot of uncharacteristic shots, like Nick Richards missed a lot of shots around in the paint. But then he figured it out in the second half, and the Commodores got exposed. Tyrese Maxey used his explosiveness to drive to the lane. The Commodores didn't have an answer, and then Nick Richards used his signature, sort of sky hook, and then we didn't have an answer to that because they're undersized. So it was really a tale of two halves, and it's unfortunate that they couldn't hold on to win.
Yeah, a lot of these first halves, we've seen breakout performances. We saw it yesterday from Disu and from Evans. Both of them put together great first halves, and both of them were non-factors offensively in the second half. And I think what started to happen late in this game, and what's happened a couple times, is they really just defer to Saban Lee to get the job done.
Yep.
And look, he's their best offensive player. He's the guy who should have the ball in his hands. But there needs to be more motion. They need to be able to spread the floor more. And we saw that in the first half, and we've seen it a lot in the first half. Guys getting open threes, guys making threes, especially Evans. But this is the second time where we've seen Evans really shine in the first half. We saw a couple games ago he had 25 in the first half.
Yeah.
This game he had 10. Still a fantastic game for him, or a fantastic half. And then he finished the game with 10 last night. He didn't score in the second half. The game he had 25 in the first half. He finished the game with 31. He only had 6 in the second half. We're not seeing those first half performances really carry over to the second half, and I think that's part of the issue. They're really just kind of relying on Lee to get the job done, and they need to carry over that first half mentality for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and I think that goes along with Bobby's point about this team getting tight in the second half. I think once they realized this is a game that they can win, I think they got stagnant, they didn't move the ball, and they didn't get the good three-point looks that they were getting in the first half. But definitely when you look at the defensive side of the ball, they got out-rebounded by 10. Kentucky had 12 blocks. They were completely overmatched in the paint. And when you're not getting great three-point looks as they were, and when you're trying to force it inside, it's not a great recipe against Nick Richards.
No, for sure. And also, to your point about Lee, they ran the offense through him and through Pippen, and when they both couldn't come up offensively, because a guy like Maxwell Evans had cooled off, you didn't have a third option to be able to make a shot when you needed it. So I think that really, didn't help at all. And also the free throws were not good at all in this game, and that's a theme we've seen this entire season. They didn't get to the line very much. I mean, we thought they had life in that one stretch where they had, a number
Four
of fouls in
fouls in 20
seconds on Kentucky, right? But they still, when they got to the line, they still weren't making those free throws. And I remember a situation where they were down 5 points, and then Pippen got to the line and he missed both free throws. And if he had made one, they would have gone to 3, and that could have totally changed the momentum again. But the second half was all Kentucky.
Yeah, it was, and you see it here. I mean, this is what we've seen so often is just right out of the locker room, what was once a 14-point Vanderbilt lead just quickly erased. And within the first 10 minutes of the second half, that 14-point lead was a 7-point lead the other way. Kentucky continued to kind of pile onto that lead. You see quickly had a couple open threes. He hit 2 more late to really close this game. And the defensive intensity wasn't there in the second half.
No.
Kentucky had 51 second-half points after scoring just 27 in the first half. And why? They were getting wide-open looks. They were getting offensive rebounds. Nick Richards was getting easy buckets. And that goes back to what you were saying before, Justin. Obina just couldn't get the job done.
No.
And I know they wanted Obina on Nick Richards for size purposes. Nick Richards is 6'11". He looks even taller than that. It's really tough to ask somebody much smaller than him to guard him. But let's face it, Moyer's 6'7", and he was doing a much better job than Obina was. And he was there in the first half. He was defending him. Richards was 2 of 6 for 4 points in the first half. I mean, this is a guy who's one of the best players in the conference, who's one of the 3 best bigs in the conference, certainly one of the best centers in the country. And Moyer really handled him for most of that first half. And then what did we see in the second half? Obina came back because he was in foul trouble early. He was able to come back in the second half. Moyer came in for a stretch of a minute and a half, and he was out, and he never came back. And that was so much of the issue for me, is that, look, the guards did most of the damage.
Yeah.
I mean, Tyrese Maxey, Ashton Hagans, and Emmanuel Quickly all played fantastic games.
Maxey had what, 25?
Maxey had 25. Hagans was 2 assists from a triple-double. And Quickly was the one who hit the threes late to really close this game. They all played well. But if you have the post presence on the defensive end, and Nick Richards and E.J. Montgomery aren't options to get some of those putbacks and to get some of those easy looks, it makes things tougher on the guards. You can defend those guards much more tough, and that was some of the issue for me.
I think also, I mean, when you're getting out rebounded like that, you got to switch something up. I think putting Moyer in there, he gives you some energy on the glass, maybe try to get something going. And I think you can also play a 5-out with Moyer on the floor, whereas Edge kind of clogs up the paint. He doesn't do much on the outside of that 5 to 7 foot range. And I think that would have created a lot of driving lanes for Saban Lee, for Scottie Pippen. I'll turn it positive a little bit. I thought this team fought. I think they fought the last 3 games. Going into second halves with leads is not something they did for most of the season thus far. So throwing the first punch is impressive from a young group. And you got to love what you've seen out of Jordan Wright, out of Dylan Disu. Scottie's been up and down, but he gave you some good stuff last night. So I think that's all really encouraging, and it's encouraging that these guys fight for Stackhouse. Calipari said it after the game. They really play hard for Coach Stack. And that's the biggest thing I take away from this.
Yeah, I want to touch on that because, I mean, let's face it, Vanderbilt was in this game for much of this basketball game. They were in the game against Kentucky a couple weeks ago. They beat LSU at home. I mean, even the loss to Mississippi State, they were in that game for most of the game. This isn't the same team that was getting blown out by 26 points on the road at South Carolina. This is a different team. Are you starting to see that growth from game to game that gives you a little bit more confidence, not just in Stackhouse, but in the team going into next year and the year after that they have the pieces to win? It's just a matter of growth.
Yeah, definitely. I think you put it exactly right. I mean, this gives me a lot of encouragement as a fan, first and foremost, just to see that this team will improve next year. And I'm also really excited to see the continued development of the young guys like Disu and Pippen, and also the recruiting class that comes in. I love to see, how Stackhouse is going to recruit, and then what pieces they're going to use, and they're going to, employ to get better. I mean, obviously, you're not going to have a guy like Nesmith, considering that he will probably declare, but I'm optimistic. I mean, I mean, I'm about most things, but in this I am. I mean, I think you have to be.
No, you got to be, especially with the young guys on this roster and some of the guys they're going to have coming in. Coach Stack even talked about it after the game. They've got 2 transfers, DJ Harvey and Quentin Malora-Brown, who've been out all year, but are definitely going to add some size and some physicality, which will be huge. You have a Kansas transfer coming in, a guard who Isaiah McBride. Who's very talented. And he'll be able to step right in. And then you got Miles Studi so far in the 2020 class, and we'll see how Coach Stackhouse adds to that. But there are reasons to be encouraged by this team's performance.
Yep, absolutely. Vanderbilt still only 1 conference win, but we're starting to see the wheels turning a little bit more, maybe some confidence going into the rest of the season and next year. One team that's not short on confidence are the Vandy boys, coming off a national championship run in Omaha at the College World Series, defeating Michigan in the 3-game set. They'll start the season with Michigan again on Friday at 6 o'clock Central Time in Arizona. That game on MLB Network. Guys, this is a team that lost a lot last year. They lost a lot of guys from that lineup. A 59-win team, a team that only lost 3 games in the last couple months of the season, a team that really was about as good as you could ask for on that level, and in times where you needed them to be great. This team was always great. People need to remember, this is a new season. This is not a team that's going to win 59 games and repeat. There's no reason they can't repeat, but they're not going to have one of the great seasons in college baseball history. You only see those seasons every so often. So going into this season, I mean, how does this team look different than it did last year?
I think you make a good point about standards. I think Vanderbilt fans need to realize, yes, that season is one of a kind. That season is not going to come around regularly. So I think lowering the standards, but also keeping them high. And I think Coach Corbin knows exactly how to do that with this group. I think this group's going to rely heavily on pitching. We'll get into it more, but I think it's going to be a dynamic rotation. I think they're going to have a great pen, which will be huge for some of the young pitchers who are going to get some great experience. And then it's going to be about who's going to produce runs in the middle of this order. You know you have Austin Martin. You know he's going to hit over 325 this season again and probably be a top 10 pick next year. But which outfielders are really going to step up and hit for power so that guys like Cooper Davis and Austin Martin at the top of that order are coming across the plate regularly? So that's my big question, but I'm confident they have the personnel to do it.
Yeah, I just am excited to see how the pieces fit, the new pieces. Yeah. And also, not even just guys who are coming in as freshmen, like a guy like a Carter Young taking over at shortstop potentially, but also a guy like Ty Duvall. I think he's someone really to look at. Is that it's no easy, feat replacing Philip Clark in his production from last year. Philip Clark appeared in 70-plus games, he was one of 3 guys to do that, and he started 45 games at catcher. So that is obviously big shoes to fill. Yeah. He hit over 300. He had 25-plus RBIs, but if I'm encouraged by Ty Duvall because of the late season run and the stretch that he had, where I think he knocked in something like 16 RBIs over 15 games or something. Yep. So that is encouraging to me, and I don't know if he's going to be able to keep up that over an entire season, and maybe they won't need him to. But it's a veteran presence like that, and also Harrison Ray, that's I think is going to help this team. But they probably won't be as good as last year, like you said, but I think the veteran leadership will help.
Yeah, last year was a team that, look, they had great pitching, and we saw it at the end of the season, especially with Rocker, obviously that no-hitter, and then him and Hickman in the College World Series.
Yep.
But this was a team that got there with offense, outstanding offense, hit over 100 home runs last year. Guys in the middle of that lineup, J.J. Bleday led the nation in homers. Austin Martin himself hit double-digit home runs at the top of that order. That won't be what happens this year. You won't see another team hit 100 home runs like Vanderbilt did this year. What you will see from Vanderbilt is standout pitching. Where last year's team was built around offense, this year's team will be built around pitching and defense, and that's because they have Hickman at the top of the order. It's because they have Kumar Rocker pitching on Saturdays, and it's because even the guys on Sunday, midweek, in the back of the bullpen are strong. We found out earlier today Eater will be the Sunday guy. Really no surprise there. But, I mean, this is a lefty that sits in the mid-90s, who has an excellent curveball, and who has pitched on the big stage. Remember, he had the last 9 outs for in Game 3 of that College World Series victory against Michigan. This is a guy who's been there. He's now heading into his junior year. He had a lot of midweek starts over the course of the past couple years. So this is a guy who really, he has first-round MLB talent, we just haven't seen him put all the pieces together. This might be the year we see it all put together really for Eder.
Yeah, and I think he'll get the opportunity to do that. I think when you look at his role the last 2 years, it's been a pen role. So I think now stepping into the starting spot is great for him from a draft perspective, but also for this team. I think it'll be great to have a lefty at the end of the weekend rotation. And he won't have a ton of pressure on him because he does have Tyler Brown behind him, Ethan Smith, Chance Huff behind him. So I think that should give him a lot of confidence. I'm excited to see that curveball work. But yeah, this rotation should be seriously dynamic.
And I think about also Kumar Rocker and his expectations. Do you think that, I know I'm not supposed to really ask the questions, but do you think that he will have the same success as last year?
No, definitely not the way he had it at the very end of last season. But when you look at the season as a whole, Rocker still finished the season with a +3 ERA.
Sure.
He didn't put up unbelievable numbers for the entire course of the season. It was just that late stretch that was so amazing. So we'll see somewhere in between that. We won't see the Rocker that got shelled for 10 runs against TCU on opening weekend.
Yeah.
He's grown a lot since then. But we also shouldn't expect the 19 strikeout no-hitters, the regular 12, 13 strikeout performances. Look, this is a guy who's going to have a sub-3 ERA. He's going to strike out a lot of batters. We know that how good that fastball is, but more importantly, we know how good that slider is. He's going to be one of the best pitchers in the country just because he's so genetically superior to all the other guys around him, and he's so polished with those couple pitches. But look, he'll have some starts that don't go his way.
Of course.
He's human,
All pitchers do.
and fans need to be ready for that, and people need to be ready for that. But look, this is a guy who could be at the top of any rotation in the country. Mason Hickman happens to be the Friday guy, but those guys are both aces for this team, and we should expect to see it from them going forward. I want to turn from the pitching side to the field because that's where all those new guys you talked about, Bobby, that's where they'll all be, especially in that infield. I know Austin Martin and Harrison Ray returning at third and second, but you've got 2 freshmen at first base and shortstop. What stands out about those guys and leads you to believe that they're ready to be successful early?
For me, Carter Young is really an interesting one. Coach Corbin's raved about his defense, and I think it'll be great to have a textbook shortstop defender behind these great pitchers. And over at first will be interesting. I think overall, I believe in Corbin to get this lineup in order and figure out the pieces and where they fit, which is great to have confidence in a coach like that because he's done it, he knows how to do it, he knows these kids. So I'm not worried about the lineup at all, but I'll be interested to see where everyone kind of fits in.
Yeah, and also to your point about Carter Young, he's sort of got almost a pedigree of winning already. Like in his touted high school career, he was on the USA Baseball's U18 team. He was Under Armour All-American, so he is is used to the culture of success that this program has, and I think it shows a lot of trust in him that Coach Corbin has sort of slotted him in the starting role, and he'll probably bat later in the lineup, so the pressure won't necessarily be on him. And it'll be a good growth season for him to be able to understand what college baseball is really like because it's a different game than high school baseball. Things are faster, pitchers are better. I think hopefully he'll have a good year, but he doesn't have to have that great of a year because the other guys like Ray or like Martin can pick up the slack.
Yeah, but I think they just kind of want that standout defensive shortstop.
Yeah.
He hits 200. I think Corbin's still happy if he's not making errors, and that's the
Exactly,
bottom line for him. Spencer Jones, another guy, freshman, he'll play first base this weekend. 6'7", lanky guy who can really hit to all fields. I think that's something that Vanderbilt's looking for to succeed Julian Infante, who felt like he was really with this program for all of the past decade. He was kind of a mainstay at first base. Now they get somebody like Spencer Jones, a lefty at first base, who's really a little bit different in that respect. Who do you like in the outfield with this team? Because the outfield, we know all 3 of those guys, Pat DeMarco, Steven Scott, and of course J.J. Boudet, all huge pieces last year, all gone this year. They need to be replaced by 3 guys. Who do you like there?
I like Isaiah Thomas. I think he's got to be a guy who drives in runs. He hits well to the gaps. He hit 368 in albeit limited outings last year. But I think he's going to be someone who's going to be put in a lot of positions to drive in runs with Cooper Davis and Austin Martin on base at the top of that order. He'll probably hit middle of the pack, I would imagine. So I like him to break out and hit for a lot of power.
Yeah, I like Cooper Davis. I think when you look at a guy who's got a combination of a good glove in the outfield, who can almost play all 3 positions, that's invaluable. I also think that he's got the average. He hit 327 last year, and he can steal bases too. He can provide some speed. I think he had something like 15 stolen bases in his senior year of high school. So that's a well-rounded player that like to use it again, is invaluable in a lineup.
Yep. And he'll hit at the top of that lineup almost certainly. He'll be that leadoff guy starting on Friday. Isaiah Thomas will provide some of that power. I think Tate Colwick will be that third outfielder, and that's a name to remember. And he's a guy who hasn't seen a ton of time on the field in his first season, but coming into his sophomore year, this is a guy that Tim Corbin moved from the infield to the outfield because he wanted that bat in the lineup, and that'll be a bat that hits in the middle of the lineup as well, I believe. That'll just about do it for this week of VU Sports Wired. Thank you so much for watching. Vandy boys will take on Michigan to start their season on Friday, and they'll face UConn Saturday. They'll face Cal Poly Sunday before they come back for South Alabama on Tuesday and Wednesday. We'll be back next week to break down just about all of those games. So we'll see you guys next week. Don't forget to tune in to hear about the Vandy boys.